Just maybe a quick intro to the people who are here, and just maybe a sentence or two about your name, what you do, and why you're here. Michael, do you want to go first? You're on mute.
Sorry about that, folks. I'm Michael Beale. I'm an NLP trainer and Marshall Goldsmith coach. I help people with leadership, influence, and communication. And I'm doing a project with my brain's gone, Jazz actually, and we're exploring how you implement AI into an organization. That's me.
Thank you, Michael. Nitin, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Nitin Golshrestha. I'm located in Seattle, Washington. And my interest in this is both from the perspective of me being a coach, and also from the perspective of AI, and just understanding, what I've seen posts from you, Jazz. So I'm just curious to see how and where it applies.
Okay, thank you. I've been to Seattle many times, spent a lot of time at Pike Place Market in Bellevue and the University of Washington, way back 1986 onwards. So yeah, got lots of, my best friend lives out there. I grew up with from school. So that's how I ended up out there. Thank you, Nitin. Julia?
Hello, hi. My name is Julia Kim. I'm sitting in Hungary, Budapest, and I'm conducting that AI coaching research in Oxford Brookes University. So I'm curious everything about the AI coaching. So yeah, I want to learn a lot from here.
Great.
Thank you for organizing all this.
Pleasure, Julia. Sarah, can you speak?
I can speak. I can't work my camera at the minute, though.
Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just here out of complete curiosity about AI and coaching, if I'm honest. We're looking into coaching and mentoring where I work, and so this is just me trying to find out a bit more about it.
What's the IAH stand for?
The Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much. Thank you, everybody. I won't take any more introductions for now. I think I'll just get on with what we're doing today and what the format's going to be. We're going to spend about 30 minutes. I'm just going to introduce you to a 50,000 foot kind of overview of AI and what's going to be unfolding in the next 10 years with regards to its adoption into coaching. And then the remainder of the time, the last half hour, it'll be Q&A, where I'll be able to go into a little bit more detail with some of the things that I mentioned for those of you who are curious. And I can also talk a little bit more about the various research projects I'm doing that relate to getting AI best practices to coaches, but also how AI needs to be taught to coaches, and also how people who are involved in supervision need to upskill and reskill so that they can help coaches who use AI in their practice. So I'll cover more or less all of those things in the next 30 minutes. As I said, it will be a light touch. Further meetings and webinars will go into things in a lot more detail. I've been running a 4-evening course now since December. I've run 4 instances of that. And I'll be running a practitioner course as well from May onwards. But for today, it's just a briefing. It's just a kind of intro, a primer, as I said in the text for this particular meeting. So I'm going to begin and just share my screen with what work we're going to be doing today, and just maximize that. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Yeah, good. I'm just going to move my logo and thing and camera out of the way. So you can see that I'm going to focus on what's going on this year and what's going to unfold over the next 10 years. In past role as at university, I was a futurist, which means I looked at trends and I did forecasts for the European Union as well as various academic circles, especially in emerging technologies and how they're going to affect learning and education in the UK as well as in Europe. So you'll probably see quite a bit of an influence of that in the presentation I'm doing today. in terms of roles, I'm founder of the Artificial Intelligence Coaching Alliance, which has got about 200 members now globally that are leading researchers into AI and its influence on coaching. I'm also co-chair of the government apprenticeship program for coaching professionals, the Trailblazer group for that, and the government trade body for digital and technology industries, which is Tech UK. I'm a member of the Skills and Diversity Council for that too. So that's my background. If you want to find out more, just go to the LinkedIn page where you'll see a lot more extensive history about me. Okay, I'm going to begin here. And this is a question that's come up a lot for coaches, which is how far can an AI coach compared to a human coach, what they can actually do. And what I did to illustrate the state of things right now is this diagram called the spectrums of coaching. And you'll see straight away that the range that an AI coach can do things in coaching is nowhere near as far and extensive as what a human coach can actually do. You'll see that there's a particular barrier that AIs can't get past right now, and that is this barrier of lived experience. Humans have got lived experience. Through that, they're able to kind of derive the empathy, compassion, and obviously states of consciousness. And currently, AI can't get past this because it's not capable of generating its own lived experience. And that's also one of the reasons why it's not really great at generating genuine empathy, compassion, or consciousness. It can do simulations, but it doesn't create that kind of heartfelt empathy that most coaches would probably generate with their clients in a session. Now, you'll see at the beginning that it's probably capable of all these things in terms of generating rapport. And if you do NLP, then you'll be conscious of how important rapport is with a client. AI can certainly acknowledge and appreciate and align. It can even do affirmation and give you some sense of agency or authorization and accommodate to how you are. This is very much along the line of what might be called cognitive empathy or sympathetic rapport. It's an intellectual version of that heartfelt empathy that I was talking about just now along that rapport spectrum. But as I said, the higher states of empathy usually involve direct experience with the person, being in presence with them. And that's where there's a hard barrier and limit. AI can't get past that right now. It relies on human beings to feed it that experience in the form of data and a whole bunch of other things. What that also means, though, is that AIs are really only capable of helping people go through changes that are very small, like transactional, something that happens in the moment. You might get them to help you with a number of transactions, and together that might lead to some kind of transition. That's a bit more of a significant change in a person. And it's possible even you can help get an AI to take a person through several transitions and experience some kind of transformation. But this is where it starts to slow down in terms of its capacity and capability, because it hits that hard barrier of experience again. And it means it can't go to a place which human beings can, which is human beings can transcend who they are. They can become someone different. And a coach or a therapist, they're actually capable of helping a client to transcend their current circumstances and their way of being into something that's got more capacity, it's got more consciousness as well. So you'll find that though AIs, they can't get past doing more than just generating transformation. They're very good at the lowest common denominators of change, which are transactional and transitional forms of change. But you'd be hard put to guarantee that any AI could help a person transcend who they're actually being. So they're very good at helping people in changing what they're doing and how they're doing things. But it'll be a stretch to say that they can help change who people actually are and transcend their current way of being into a different state of being, a transcendental kind of change, if you like. You can see that AIs are also very good at working with content of someone's experience. They can help someone with their competence, maybe their capability as well. And as they do that, they increase the amount of confidence that can be generated in a client. But again, when you hit that lived experience barrier, you find the individual can't really be helped beyond these factors of content, competence, and capability by an AI. It's very hard for an AI to develop capacity within a human being, let alone cultivate that kind of consciousness. Okay, so it's important to look at this as a kind of sobering check to see exactly what is AI capable of and what should we be considering it for if we're going to use it in coaching to refine our coaching practice, the potential that clients are realizing and the ability for them to attain goals as well. And I've put the hard barrier there that you can see. You can see the range of the AI coach currently can help people all the way up to the transformational kind of change and capability development and help them through a kind of rapport, which goes all the way up to this agency, authorization, and accommodation, but will not take that person past lived experience kind of forms of engagement. All right, so please bear this in mind if you're going to take AI up in your coaching practice, understand how far it can go, and also use it to reassure you that as long as you're being human in your approach to working with clients, using your consciousness, your compassion, empathy, experience, and your wisdom, even if you're a novice coach, you will always have that as an advantage over an AI. An AI cannot get those states, I'll say yet, because that might change in the future with how quantum computers might take on AI and begin to simulate the same kind of behaviors that we see in the brain, which runs on quantum behaviors. All right, so I just wanted to put that up as a kind of starting point, just to frame everything that follows. Now let's have a look at things in terms of how do we work with this in practice. So you can see that when we look at coaching as a whole, we need to consider a roadmap for it with regards to AI and how it's going to be adopted in coaching. So in November last year, Alison Mitchell, who's the head of research for the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, and I were having a discussion about creating a roadmap for how AI is going to be adopted in coaching. And because of my background in road mapping and the future work and trend forecasting, I offered to start putting together that roadmap and take into account all the factors that are going to be important in considering the use of AI in coaching. And here you can see some of the territories that are probably going to need to be researched and worked with in order for us to get a proper grip on how AI can be of benefit to coaching, but also be aware of its risks as well. And you can see it covers a number of areas. It covers how we capture data with AI, how we use generative forms of AI, you see in ChatGPT, for guidance and development, but more specifically, how we could use it to curate what we're doing in practice with a client. Now, that all lead into teaching as well and supervision. And ultimately, people are going to design research that centers on what's discovered in practice in teaching and supervision. And that's where we get AI-directed research. The outcomes of that will probably help set standards around ethics and integrity and compliance, and also standards and competencies as well, specifically using AI in coaching practice. And ultimately, regulatory frameworks that tie in with things like the European Union AI Act law. I feel, though, that the flow of this shouldn't be going around clockwise. It should be the reverse, that you start from regulations and standards and competencies and then work your way back into research and then into practice. So many people who are teaching AI, they're teaching about competencies in AI, how to use ChatGPT, how to ask questions for coaching purposes, these kind of things. And then compliance might very well be an afterthought. But with the EU AI Act now in the process of being put out into the world and enforced, it's clear that actually what we need to focus on first is compliance. Make sure what we're doing with AI in coaching is ethical and it complies with the law, and then produce competencies based on that are going to be used in practice and teaching and supervision. So rather than competency first, compliance later, the focus has to be on compliance-based competencies that define what we do in terms of best practices in coaching. All right, so that's kind of a roadmap of the territories that got to be covered. Now, AI is moving really fast, and as someone who works in software, I'm conscious that if we don't match the rate at which software is updated in what's typically cycles of at least 1 week or 2 week agile cycles, very rapidly coaches are going to get behind. AI can't be something you can upskill and reskill in once a year. Certainly the governing bodies, they need to ensure someone's working on this at least once a day somewhere in the world. So the association I've set up, the Artificial Intelligence Coaching Alliance, that's what it's doing. There's always someone working on it somewhere in the world, with 220 now, I think it is, members across the world, which is a good start, because we can then feed that back to the individual governing bodies and help them define their competencies and their standards and the ethics with which they guide the coaches who are their members. All right, so looking into the future, if things carry on the way that they are, we're going to see AI accelerate the democratization of coaching, making it more widely available and accessible to people. And once that starts to happen, another natural consequence of that will be that people who use AI in different cultures and nations will probably start using their own culturally specific aligned data sets. And that means AI is going to get a lot more diversified in terms of its intercultural data sets and models. Further down the line, we're going to see that if that happens, those nations, those cultures will probably want their own kind of governance that doesn't come from a Western-based organization. So just as with the banks, we saw finance change dramatically with the arrival of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and it meant that money wasn't centrally controlled by banks anymore, but the control was decentralized. Anybody could work with managing money through this very secure blockchain kind of architecture that facilitated Bitcoin. We're probably going to see that happen with coaching too, a decentralization where people's credentials and governance is all done through the architecture that looks after Bitcoin and blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So we're not going to see that probably for another 10 years, but you can see the timelines there and how they're likely to unfold. Diversification is definitely going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years. It's already begun. And then the decentralization will probably start to happen towards the end of the decade. Okay, so just a quick overview for those of you who want to start using AI in coaching. I treat it very much like, I spent a lot of time training people who had addiction issues, and that were going up to one of the main clinics in the UK, the Priory Clinic. And I worked with someone who did mindfulness. And one of the things that I discovered around that time is with the AIDS epidemic and also the drug epidemics that emerged in the 70s and 80s, we knew that some people were going to do what they were going to do, and that all you could do is take a preventative and safety first approach to helping them. So give someone, condoms, give them needles, just to prevent infection and prevent spread of disease. A similar approach is being used to manage crime in places like Glasgow, and it's caused dramatic transformations. And I think the same approach needs to probably be taken with AI, where we take the assumption that everybody's already using it, but what we should do is at least facilitate people to use it in a way that's safe and that facilitates empowerment. And I've been doing it for about 16 years, AI-based coaching, with my own AI coaching platform since 2008, where with thousands of people, got thousands of hours of understanding what the best practices are. And here, for me, are the 4 kind of stages that you should probably approach the use of AI in coaching. If you're a coach, start from a place where you're just using AI for information, either for yourself or for your clients. The AI informs you as a coach, and your job as a coach is to maybe create your own guidance suggestions as a basis for what you might want to do with a client in the session, for example. The next level up from that is to take an AI guided approach. And this is where the AI informs and offers guidance suggestions to you. And then you filter those suggestions as a basis for what you want to do with a client But at this point, no AI is involved in a direct connection with the client. The third level is where the AI is used directly in a session to guide both coach and client. And it's all still overseen and supervised by the human coach. So the AI informs and offers guidance suggestions directly to the client, but the coach moderates those suggestions, adapts them if needed. Last but not least, when coach and client have had quite an extensive relationship with the AI in coaching sessions, then it's possible that the AI can guide the client outside of sessions in an unsupervised way, so long as there's safeguards in the algorithms to ensure that the client isn't nudging up against contracting boundaries or psychological safety issues, at which point they should pause what they're doing with the client and notify the coach, who can come in and do an intervention if necessary. What you should never do is start working with AI by going straight into the AI delivered unsupervised form, especially with the upcoming acts of law regarding AI. If you do that, you could be subject to risks which can be monitored and overseen through acts of law, like the EU AI Act law. I'll mention a few of the risks a little bit later, you'll see. I would always suggest start from AI informed and then go to AI guided, then AI delivered, supervised, and finally unsupervised. Never go to number 4. So many people are. And you really should approach AI in a kind of safety first kind of mentality. All right, so treat it like radioactivity. A radioactive substance can feel nice and warm when you get a grip on it. But if you're not working with it with appropriate safety, you're exposing yourself possibly to invisible harms. And you've got to be really careful with that. So do treat it as something that is effectively radioactive, because there's a reason why the EU AI Act law has come into force alongside of other laws, like the digital marketing and digital services laws on top of the GDPR laws. They're there because safety is needed in handling something that can be so influential and powerful in what it does with human beings, especially to human beings that are contributing to an economy like the European Union economy. There's a reason why those laws are put into place, really to protect the economies and peoples of the European Union. Okay, so that's a 4-stage approach, best practice approach to adopting AI into coaching if you want to minimize risks and while maximizing benefits, and at the same time being compliant. It's that compliance first, competency second kind of mentality, or should I say compliance-based competency. And that'll take us on to the next bit, where you can see that if we're going to do this across the coaching industry or coaching sector, we need to ensure that people have got competencies, that coaches themselves have competencies in how they use AI with individuals, groups and teams and organizations within a session, but also people who provide training and education have competencies to teach the use of AI in coaching at individual, group and organizational levels. And not to forget that supervisors, when they are supervising a coach who uses AI in coaching, that they are actually making sure that those coaches are following guidelines that are compliant, and the competencies that they are practicing are based on those compliance factors. At the highest level, a professional regulation governing body level, you'd expect people who are operating there will already be competent in working with supervision of AI facilitated and augmented sessions, teaching the use of AI in coaching credentials and certification practices, as well as obviously what's going on within a given session and what clients might need to be informed by. I've created 4 courses, of which I've been running the foundation course now over the last 4 or 5 months. And that is going to lead into practitioner applications, supervision and regulatory workshops and courses, which cover all these competencies that you see here. It's got to ultimately be based on, in the case of Europe, what the articles are of the European Union Artificial Intelligence Act. So every competency that you saw there we're making sure that we start from the articles of law, then we produce the competency sets, and then we look at what the best practices are. And you can see an example here for the foundation. It focuses on just getting some awareness of AI, how to use it in practice to regulate what's going on with the session, and maybe even use it for creative development and professional development that links into things like teaching, CPD, and supervision, for example. So that's just a blow up of the kind of competencies that are required just in that very first foundational layer of competency sets. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time into this, but say that the future is going to be very much about seeing artificial intelligence, courtesy of quantum computers, actually start developing semblance of sentience, and then ultimately what makes us human, Homo sapiens, develop artificial forms of sapience. Now, this will correspond to artificial general intelligence, artificial sentience, and artificial sapience will align to what they call artificial superintelligence, ASI. So we're going to see an evolution in terms of what computers are capable of doing and behaving around, and they'll start to become more and more what we might regard as being alive. And the focus will be on those machines having a sense of their own being, as opposed to just focusing on simulating behaviors and what human beings are doing. So a lot of what I'm doing is focused, as I said, on what I've learned about the EU AI Act, other laws and other bits of compliance. But here's the areas that it specifically is relevant for in terms of how we go from compliance to competency to practice. Anybody who is using AI for self-guidance, whether a coachee or mentee, professionals are using AI in the sessions, supervision of coaches and mentors using AI, training provision, certification modules that cover competencies for using AI by coaches and mentors. There's a regulation and governance that's going to be affected for coaching and mentoring professionals that use AI in their practice. That will be linked in a very significant way to acts of law. And also research and development that's carried out that uses AI in coaching and mentoring. And last but not least, it's obviously going to affect commercial platforms that use AI to provide coaching applications or services or products that are all founded on AI. So those are the areas that will get affected. In terms of impacts, there are things to focus on, and this is what this briefing and other workshop bits I've been doing a focus on. First, roadmaps needed, which I briefly introduced at the beginning. You can find out more information about that in the report that we've got online, the Emerging AI Coaching Paradigm report. New competency sets, which I've just mentioned about the different levels in terms of client, coach, session, training, supervision, and regulation and governance, but also at different scales, individual, team, and organizational and planetary scales as well, if you like. And last but not least, there are going to need to be modules that provide training and certification curriculums around AI and help people through continuing professional development, just to make sure that coaches are AI literate. There's a bunch of other areas here I'm not going to go into, but these first three are the most important that we really need to get sorted here in 2024. And I've, through the AI Coaching Alliance, been working with others to try and get that done. So some of the people that are on this program, for example, are helping me do that. Here's some of the risks I mentioned about the AI coaching risks that can come up that are in alignment with the EU AI Act. And you can see of the things that are unacceptable risks where systems could be banned, all of them, all these things that are in purple, they all relate to things that can come up in coaching. And you can see all of the risks that come under the unacceptable category, they are relevant for coaching. And two of the major ones in the high risk category, to do with educational and vocational training, as well as employment and management of workers and access to self-employment, these are very strongly relevant risks that need to be considered if you're using AI in coaching. So this is what I meant about let's make sure we're compliant first and avoiding these risks. Then let's create competencies, and then let's create best practices. Now, what happens when you don't do that? You get a kind of Google crisis dilemma, especially when there's incongruence between AI, diversity, and ethics policies. You end up with German soldiers that have got diversity amongst them in an inappropriate way. And this is because of incongruence and incoherence between AI, diversity, and ethics policy implementations. So this is why I said compliance first, and then worry about competencies and putting things into practice. Don't do practice first, then think about competencies, and then worry about ethics. And wondering whether your policy and your way of implementing things is complying with law, for example. That's an upside down way of doing things. So I'm running some workshops soon, specifically looking at these challenges of incongruences between AI and diversity and ethics policies, and how people need to get ready at organizational levels to avoid those Google, Gemini type disasters. And I'm going to finish there, just stop there for a moment. And we've done the first half hour. So now it's time for us to ask some questions and get some clarification on some of the things I mentioned. And you're welcome to unmute yourselves. And if there's some things that have caught your eye, you just want to get a bit more clarity on them, or you want to just talk about them, or even just give me some feedback about what you just saw, then feel free to do any of those things. So just put your hand up, or just take yourself off mute and go ahead and just share what it is that's on your mind.
Hi, it's Sarah. Could I just ask a question on I put something in the chat, but I'm not sure I worded it quite correctly. But there was a slide with the 4 points on how the AI would potentially work. Mm-hmm. And on point 3, it said the AI coach makes the suggestions. Yeah. And then it said that you would also be able to do have suggestions and adaptations. And is that something that you would suggest that somebody does prior to the AI informing the client, or would it? The AI would inform the client, but you would monitor it and then go, oh no, I think we should add blah, blah, blah.
Well, what I ended up doing with that best practice process was I found that 4-stage process can equally apply to your first session that you use AI. It can equally apply to subsequent sessions. For example, the very first session, I might take an AI-informed approach. I'm not going to take the AI directly into the session. I'll use it to generate some information, just to cultivate some awareness, but not necessarily specific guidance. And then maybe in the second session, I take some guidance suggestions from the AI and choose whether or not in the session to try them out. And then the third is that I allow for the AI to be part of a tripartite relationship in a session between myself, the client, and the AI. And even then, I'm supervising. I'm looking at the suggestions that are coming out, and I'm working together with the client to decide what's appropriate in that situation. I'll probably take the first kind of role of authority there in terms of supervising and overseeing everything. And I'll liaise with the client to say, right, out of these approaches that come up, what shall we work with? And once both client and coach have developed their capacity and their capability to work with the AI in a safe way, then it's probably okay at that point to allow the client to use the AI on their own without me necessarily directly overseeing it, but with the safeguards and the algorithms in place to ensure that if anything does come up for psychological safety or contracting reasons, then the coach is going to get informed and they can step in for that situation. So adaptation is always there, but adoption is something that's a very strict process. At the beginning, there's no adoption. And obviously right at the end, the client completely adopts the use of the AI between the sessions, for example, under the oversight of the actual coach. Now, I learned all those things the hard way, over 16 years and thousands of hours of working with AI in coaching of numerous people, which is the reason why I say to coaches who are just starting to use AI in coaching practice to absolutely not use it in an unsupervised way with a client, and always start from an AI informed approach first, and then a slowly, steady, step-by-step way move through those other stages. In the clients that I've worked with historically, I would typically in the first week just work with an AI informed approach. In the second session, I might go for AI guided, third, AI supervised, and by fourth, they should already been onboarded effectively enough that they can afford to use the AI between sessions. And with me overseeing it all and watching it constantly, I can be sure that I'm not facilitating them to being exposed to risks, for example, and that they are getting genuine value and benefit instead from what's going on. Is that stage process clear in terms of exactly that distinction between adaptation and adoption?
Yeah, that is really helpful, actually. Thank you.
All right, great. Nitin, you got something to say?
Yeah, thanks for that explanation, Jazz. My question would be, how much of this is happening in real time versus post or pre-session, and are there technologies available today that do something in real time? And then how does a coach avoid being distracted and coming across as somewhere else while they are in a coaching session?
Well, the AI coaching platform I created, I work with that in real time with my clients, but only after an appropriate onboarding process. Which is, we would have gone through those stages in the sequence I just talked about. And then, for example, I might have a session, I bring up some metrics to do with what the AI has raised, and then we'll talk over them and we'll look at what kind of response do we want to have, and how do we want to go forwards in terms of what aspects of potential they want to realize, and what goals do they want to form that they ultimately want to attain that align with the potential that they want to realize. And we're literally having that discussion live in the session with the AI stuff there. And if we want to, we can look at another aspect of the AI generated information and get a different perspective, or a refined perspective, or a bigger perspective. The AI I have that I put together, it's not just something that gives advice. It's not that's not its job. Its job is to provide awareness through which a person can choose how to empower themselves. That's what it's about. But it also is conscious of the person's progress over time, so it can see underlying trends, and it can suggest based on underlying trends what the person might want to look out for in the future to avoid risks, but at the same time, generate opportunities for realizing their potential in and taking advantage of things that are emerging, for example. So we're beginning to see a little bit of that with ChatGPT and other channels through which they've developed memory, so they can keep track of changes that have happened over time. But sometimes taking a statistically based, generative text-based conversation as a basis for coaching isn't sufficient. Sometimes you need psychometrics. You need precise data in order to guide you, and that is, got a minimization of uncertainty to it. You want clarity. So for my AI coaching platform, for example, a lot of the numbers in a paint by numbers way are turned into colors, color heat maps, for example. And even the heat maps, snapshots on a given day over successive days, can be stitched together like frames in a film strip, and it can be run like a movie. You can watch the flow of someone's change and identify where there are blocks, where there are trends, like watching the weather on TV, and you see the animations and you see the forecast. It works exactly the same way, but AI helps in taking a vast amount of data and crunching it into an actionable insight that the client can actually use to make some decisions about how they want to be empowered. So it's never about advice. It's always about awareness of routes to empowerment and realizing potential. That's what it's got to do. It runs on a very important working definition, and not conventional definition of AI, but a working definition of AI in coaching. And the key principles are, it's got to be able to foster insight generation, and it's got to be able to do it in a way which enhances, enriches, and empowers that interventional relationship between coach and client. So it's very specific. If it's not generating insights, what's the value of it? If it's not enhancing, enriching, or empowering the client relationship, what's the point of it? right? If it's doing all of those things, that's the perfect thing. It's generating the insights that will enhance, enrich, and empower the client. So providing it's doing those things, and someone who's experienced in AI coaching will understand how they can coherently generate a holistic form of value by getting that insight generation in a form that enhances, enriches, and empowers the client. I've had to do it thousands of times over. I didn't know those rules when I first started. I just realized that best practice over time, please ensure insight generation at minimum, you know? Then if you can, enhance and enrich the person's experience in a way that hopefully will empower them in the relationship that you've got with them, right? And the other factor to consider this is the tripartite relationship between the coach, client, and the AI is no different, you'd think, from other tripartite relationships, for example, between a coach, a client, and a coachee, right? It turns out in a tripartite relationship, there are 7 relationship dynamics for each entity, right? So for 3 entities, that's 21 relationship dynamics. There's a relationship the person has with themselves, for example, the relationship they have with the coach, right? Then there's a relationship with the coach and the environment, systemic environmental factors. With an AI, it's even more complicated because the AI, you're not just having a relationship with one entity. The AI is being shaped and forged possibly by millions, if not billions, of people's worth of perspectives scraped off the internet. That adds a huge amount of complexity and risk when you bring that into a tripartite relationship. But if you're a good coach, you'll have an instinct that can work with complexity in terms of dynamics in relationships. You don't need to be logical and think it all through and cater for every single dynamic. You can develop a felt sense of the situation and just work with that through an intuitive, instinctive way that you would have if you're a mature coach or you have any remote kind of sensitivity when it comes to things like empathy and the things that are alongside of that, which include things like compassion, right? So you don't need to be a mature coach to have those. People can start with those when they've just qualified and they already have them, right? So even with an AI, it's still possible to work with complex dynamics, providing you just bring in your humanity, providing you bring in your wisdom, your empathy, your compassion, your consciousness. You can still get a grip on it and still generate insights that enhance, enrich, and empower the client and help them realize their potential and get their goals sorted. That client could be an individual, could be a team, could be an organization, it could be the planet, could be society, but the process is exactly the same. The markers are still the same. Is that sufficient kind of coverage for your question?
I think so. I think, and more, I just have a short follow-up, and then I know Michael's got his hand up. So is the coachee the client? And I do want to distinguish because you use the coachee separate. The question I had was, to what extent in the 4 different stages that you had talked about, are they aware, or is the AI directly visible to them?
Okay, so the AI is only directing the client in the 3rd stage, where the coach is allowed for the AI to be in the room and provide guidance in a transparent way with the client. And technically, the AI isn't directly talking to the client. AI is talking to the relationship between the coach and the client. And the coach is overseeing exactly how the advice or the guidance or the information is going to get adopted for the purpose of empowering the client. And the client sees it all, and they've obviously got some freedom and choice and free will in it. But the main actor in that situation is the coach, who's overseeing exactly what gets presented, and through the dialogue with the client, choose what will be used to facilitate empowerment. Now, in that situation, the person who is the coachee is the person who's getting the help and being empowered. in an organizational setting, sometimes the person who's paying the money and has arranged for the coaching to happen, they would typically be called the client, but they're not necessarily the person being coached, right? And that's a tripartite relationship there. In this situation, the client and coachee, I'm collapsing them both together, because that third party that normally is deciding on arranging the coaching isn't there. I'm assuming that the person who's turned up is the person who chose to have the coaching. So the client and coach collapse into one person there. All right. But I'm also sensitive that in organizational settings, that's not necessarily the case. In those situations, you've got a four-way relationship. You've got coach, you've got the client, the coachee, and you've got the AI, right? And the one thing that many people aren't conscious of is that when you have a tripartite relationship, the AI is part of the intervention. And over several sessions, it's important that if the AI is going to be up to date and continue to be of value, that it has to grow too. It has to evolve. So just like the coach is overseeing the AI's input into the coach-client relationship and also overseeing the empowerment of the client or the coachee, the coach also has to oversee the development of the AI and make sure it's growing and evolving in the process too. And that might be a new thing. Even in a tripartite traditional relationship, it's not the job of the coach to evolve the client necessarily. The focus is on the coachee. But in this situation, it's very different. The AI is learning on the job, right? That's part of its remit. Therefore, you have to take that factor into consideration. If it's not learning appropriately and you're failing to supervise its learning, it may end up making judgment calls in the future that are biased or incongruent or incoherent. So you need to have some experience of, if you like, training an AI a little bit if you want to use AI in a coaching practice. Otherwise, the AI could go off the rails, and next thing you know, you've threatened psychological safety and broken boundaries, and you could be liable for prosecution. Right?
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. That was
Michael,
very... Yeah.
Is that enough, Nitin?
Very helpful.
Okay. Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw some observations out and react whichever way you want. Firstly, I really like the framework. I think it is a framework, and we need frameworks, but it's like evolution doesn't follow frameworks that men made. Evolution follows whatever evolution does. So I have a slight caution, but I'm very much in favour of frameworks, and also, as Jazz knows, I think with companies it's even more important, because all sorts of things will happen in companies.
One thing we're aware of is there may be more than just the stakeholders that are in front of you.
Yeah. If I'm working with the vice president, I can generally assume and I want to give him an option, I'm generally assuming he's capable of deciding between which option. And interestingly enough, I've been testing Marshall Goldsmith. If you don't know, Marshall's a coach. He's probably coached 150 of the top CEOs in the world. And he's come up with his bot, and he's pouring his experience in. Actually, there's a fun bit in. At the moment, he's now come to the point where he prefers his bot's answers to his own answers. So if somebody asks a question, he has more confidence in his bot's answer to the question than his own answers to him. I'm only throwing things up for humour and whatever the right word is, but they're real. I'm not making them up. Is point one. The point two that I find quite interesting in Marshall's coaching process, it's always between four things. It's between the client. I'll see if I got it right here. It's the AI, the coach, the client, and the environment. And again, I'm quite happy you have very different views on this. But one of Marshall's views is the environment is more important than the coach.
Mm-hmm.
But really, when you're coaching a client to survive in their environment, and the environment can undo all the stuff the coaches has done. So in some ways, you're actually coaching the client. This is senior leaders, so you may or may not apply it to other things, but you're actually getting the senior leader to impact and change their environment. So if you're measuring things, you've got to measure other things. I've been playing with this bot now. I've been lucky enough to be testing it with my clients for 3 or 4 months. And again, I'm just making a humorous comment. One of the things in Marshall's coaching process is that we get the client to ask for opinion for 5 or 6 people, 5 or 6 humans, and then we use the AI bot as an advisor. But the fun thing is, in a lot of the conversation, you've been saying the client has, the coach has to make the decision, etc., etc. But I have to tell you, often the Marshall's bot will make a better decision than the humans. Now, you may agree with me or disagree with me, but I'm just throwing things in the air. And that comes to another question, which, and I'm sorry I'm throwing the difficult stuff up, but some stage we have to sort of get round to answering it. How do you measure all this? Because unless I'm on a different planet, coaching is not measured at all well. Sorry, and please disagree with me. So we're making comments assuming that this works, whatever we say, but how do we actually know it works? What's the evidence? What is the evidence that it works? So I'm not meaning to criticize any of this, because my view is that having frameworks is actually really, really important and really, really useful. But it actually starts us answering questions that many coaches are going to find extremely annoying.
I think the most important things is, in Willie Woodward's and Anna Tavis's book on digital coaching, I think they've highlighted a really important aspect, which is how much should we rely on AI and its metrics and data, and how much should we rely on human lived experience and intuition, instinct, and coach maturity, for example. The AI coaching platform I built, it's built on metrics first, analytics. That's where it started. And I just was doing statistics in an Excel spreadsheet to generate reports. And then eventually I moved it online and I added machine learning and AI on top of it to make the results more sophisticated and accurate. So it's based on a psychometric, which is in itself based on models of psychology that are intercultural, not just Western, to respect diversity, but intercultural sensitivities too. And yeah, everything I was doing right from the word go was data driven. But in parallel with that, it was mediated by my human experience with the client and my intuition. And I would refine the AI almost with every client I actually got to meet, because I realized that AI just wasn't producing appropriate metrics that were helpful for me. So in the end, I must have developed at least 50 different metrics in the AI that were all some things that arose from my direct interactions with the clients. And I realized I want to bottle that. I want to package that. I want to put it in the AI. And in the end, I found the AI is really good at providing things to gauge things with and get hard data, evidence-based stuff. But equally, something else that's important is not the hard, intangible evidence-based stuff, but also the intangible experience that you have with the client and the engagement and the presence that you have. And the third factor is, what do you learn from all of that? What do you learn from the data and the hard evidence and the personal direct experience that you have in coaching a client? So that third element is education. How are you refining your model as you're going along, based on the experience, based on the data that's being accumulated over time? So that three-way approach is what is at the foundation of how I coach my clients. It has the data, it has the experience and the personal connection, and then there's a model which is iteratively being refined over time based on the data that's coming in, the experiences I'm getting. It's led to a very highly sophisticated way of coaching. And as I said, I've had 16 years at it, and now I'm noticing other people taking on AI coaching, and I'm wondering, okay, let's look at the metrics that they're using. Are they sticking to some degree with engaging in direct personal experience to inform that? And third, do they have a model that fits both those things? If there's any incongruence or any incoherence between those three things, then the whole AI coaching dynamic between the AI client and coach, it just isn't going to work. But if you get it right, then you can appear to create miraculous interventions and engagements and exchanges. And I'm not surprised that Marshall says what he has, because sometimes when you've got that holistic perspective and you're rich with data, experience, and lessons, yeah, you can come across as a highly mature, wise, sensitive, and empowering, force in that coach-client relationship and what it is that they're trying to empower themselves with. So I'm hoping that with quantum computers on the horizon loading up AIs, that we may even see more sophistication and more empathy and more kind of resonance, not just relevance for clients and how they use AI. And it's great to see Marshall obviously being kind of leader in that respect, by at least bottling up all his knowledge into an AI before he pops off his mortal coil.
Yeah, just a couple of things, and I'll hand the thing back. In Marshall's development of his bot, he started with content, the accuracy of data. He's now moving on to voice and voice tone, and then he's going to move on to body language, as far as training his bot go. And again, just as humans aren't right, it doesn't mean the bots are based on the data that it can scrape, and it probably scrapes a lot more data than a human. But again, it can be just as biased and just as inaccurate as us humans. It's just been quite interesting in all the small trials I've done. People have been surprised how accurate it is and how much more detail there is in his bot's answer than is when asking a normal human. However,
you can see that what he's doing, he's moving from content, and now with that expansion of competence and capability, you're going to see increased capacity and more consciousness-like engagements with that bot. But also, what we're going to see is they're going to see this dynamics that we see in tripartite relationships that I've highlighted here.
Yeah.
You can see that the client has all these dynamics in terms of relationships and the ecosystem that they're a part of and their environment. And that's just them. As I said, the AI is much more complex because of what's being fed into it by lots of different people. And then there's the coach as well themselves. But just to manage these visible 21 dynamics in real time, I've joked and I said, in order to manage them in real time, you might need a second AI just to oversee the complexity of it all.
No, you're quiet. Just a couple more things. Otherwise, I'll talk too much. So he totally admits his bot may be wrong, but then we sometimes forget humans can be terribly wrong and terribly biased. The other thing, back to your transformational, your sort of transformational model, and I may not have got this quite right. I'm cautious about the hard line. I certainly absolutely agree that there is a polar between it can't do clever things down this end and it can do very clever things down this end. And I give it a very simple illustration. A bot can tell a story which can have a significant transformational change on the client.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't mean that AI necessarily will only have a limited impact on clients. It may not be.
I'd look at that spectrum more as not a hard and fast spectrum with specific silos. I look at it more along the lines of a probability spectrum. So
there's
always a chance.
I absolutely buy that.
There's always a chance that
something
miraculous could happen at the smallest kind of intervention.
Yeah, and it is, and I absolutely agree with what you said, because this thing now of where AI can advise the coach and to some extent advise the client, but the advisor rather than telling them what to do. And the last point I make, which ties onto this, there are many different styles of coaching, and there are many different clients who have different cognitive abilities, from those that are I'm using the wrong words, those that are potentially mentally ill on one side to those that are high-performing individuals. And the rules have to change depending on the coaching style. So I don't want to make it complicated, because
I think you're right, because something I was thinking about earlier today when I was speaking to people from associational coaching was below that transactional end of the spectrum. Before that, there's actually a space which is to do with triggers and trauma. And that's absolutely a territory you don't want the AI to go in. You want to leave that to therapists or psychiatrists. You do not want to go there. So yeah, there's a part on either side of those spectrums which I've not shared, because as far as coaching is concerned, it's not particularly relevant if you've got the appropriate safeguards and psychological safety in place. So couple of important points. Look at that spectrum as something that's a spectrum of probability, increasing probability one side, less probability at the other end, but at any point something miraculous could happen. And secondly, that when it comes to adopting AI into coaching, there's no sequence necessarily to follow, but there are overlapping sets of competencies that need to be worked with in a kind of ikigai kind of way. It's about proportion and it's about overlap. And if you get the mix right, that's probably more important than following a hard and fast sequence.
Okay, sorry, one last question. That when I done my research on how coaches are using AI, I found that the people that are best at it have just thrown themselves in and used it. Okay. Now, as I say, I actually like frameworks because it saves us an awful lot of time and it's a shortcut to making lots of mistakes. But I have to comment that the people that actually have got further so far are the people that have thrown themselves in, but they haven't necessarily. They've been using AI, and there again, this goes to where the definition of coaching, because curiously, the biggest application that I found for coaches and AI was actually marketing. It wasn't coaching itself; it was actually marketing. It was writing content. It was all sorts of interesting
That's where
things.
you don't necessarily want constraints. You want to be freestyle a bit and have blue sky thinking, and AI is really good at that.
Yeah, so I think, as I say, I'm just throwing the experience that I've come across so far.
Yeah, all good points to raise, and sometimes significant things like that, I don't raise consciously because it depends on the audience.
No, and I don't want to confuse people.
No, but you raised important points, which are they're subtleties, Michael, they're nuances. And sometimes the nuances can be more significant than the blunt things that are in our face, you know. So thank you for that. All right, we're going to close up now. I think we've had a good session. Went and did a little light touch overview of the various things that probably need to be considered if you want to adopt AI into coaching. We're going to go into each of those in more detail in future workshops and courses. So keep an eye on the AI Coaching Alliance website and also the LinkedIn group, and you should get updates regarding that. If you want to give any feedback about today's session, please go to the LinkedIn group, drop some notes into there or my LinkedIn profile and share something there. Feedback's always welcome, or just connect to me directly if there's something that wasn't particularly great and you think privately I should go and try and adapt and change and improve to some degree. Any last words? Let's start with Julia. I'll come back to you, Michael.
Thank you so much. It was very helpful. And I actually have the another meeting with you soon in this Friday. So I just keep waiting for that time to give a chance to others to ask your question. Thank you so much for organizing, and it was really useful for me.
Thank you. Hopefully it set the context for our conversation on Friday.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Julia.
I appreciate it.
KD. Yeah, I don't know what your first name is. I just see KD. Can you say anything? Can you say something? No?
Thank you so much for organizing. It was very valuable. I'm sorry I couldn't use my video. I was it just wasn't convenient for where I am. But thank you so much. It was really valuable, and I would look out for your future events on Eventbrite. I found it on Eventbrite actually.
Okay, right.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Katie. Michael, something to
add? No, thank you. Thank you for organising it.
All right, great. Well, thanks everybody for attending. This session's been recorded, so if you want to refer anybody to it, please do so. I'm going to share it on YouTube so that everybody can obviously watch it in their own time. and I'll share it on LinkedIn as well. I would appreciate you disseminating it, because it just means I end up not having to run so many of these workshops. But each one's useful because it gives me feedback about additional perspectives and nuances of the kind that each of you have raised, in addition to the core content that I presented here. So thanks all for coming along, and I'll look forward to engaging each of you individually in the near future, which I know I'm going to do, because we've already got dates in our calendar for those kind of things. So I'm looking forward to that. And the last thing I'll just say is, please share. Coaches need to understand this stuff, certainly, but it's more important at this point that they at least have awareness, so that they can know what it is that they need to get ready for, and they don't get themselves into trouble, and they do the best by themselves, their profession, and most of all, their clients. Thank you, everybody.
Right. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye.
Bye.